وآل محمد.
تعالوا الشباب تعالوا هناك قدام المنبر. يلا قاعدين نسالكم خلي ناقشوا وياه ناقشوا وياه. يلا حبايبي ناقشوا وياه. تفضل حاج.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. As we've been talking about yesterday actually, we got into the Prophet and how he used to conduct himself in front of others. And how he would give us the tools so we can conduct ourselves in a very powerful manner. And there's an affinity towards us, that we create this affinity that people want to even talk to us. So on this level, we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ always used to have a smile on his face. And how it affected other people. Then number two, we talked about how the Prophet always used to shake someone's hands first. He would send his salutation first. And number three, we got to a point where the Prophet's heart. This is where I want to grab and see, okay, can we attain this heart of mercy? Can we have this heart that's not rejecting, but accepting? If you have that kind of heart, believe me, people will gravitate towards you. Why? Because Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says something so beautiful. A companion of his asked him one question, and listen to this. He said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, he said, how much do you love me? You know how he responds? He says, as much as you love me. What does that mean? If you look into the commentaries of what they mean about this, it means that we give off an aura, meaning we give off certain emotions that we cannot hide. Because Imam Ali also says, he says, whatever you try to hold back from other people, let's say you have an evil thought. If you try to hold it back from other people, or you try to be deceptive, it will come out on your limbs and your tongue. It will come out on the slips. Sometimes you slip. Sometimes, when we go outside with our friends, we swear. We go inside the house, what happens? It's like this switch that just turns off. Why? Think about that. You're living two different lives. You're living two different personalities. You don't even know who you are. A lot of times that's what happens with our kids. They lose their identity, al-hawiyya. Who are you? Number one, you're a Muslim. Number two, you're a follower of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. These two things you have to appreciate. You have to appreciate them. You have to understand them. So now, the Prophet's heart, we talked about a story when the Prophet was walking with this lady. This older lady, I'll reiterate it so we can go deeper into it. He was walking into the story. When he was walking with this lady, now as he's walking, she doesn't know he's the Prophet. And now the Prophet, she starts talking about the Prophet. She starts putting him down. She says, oh young man, stay away from this person. Don't go towards him. He's an evil man. And we said, if it was one of us, how would we react? We get angry. Does the Prophet get angry? No. He keeps walking. And he keeps walking with her. He holds back. When you hold back at this level, what happens? You're showing absolute wisdom. When to talk and when not to talk. He stays completely silent. Derive the laws of your manners from this man, because he is amazing at what he does. So now he walks and he's walking and they stop. When they stop, she says, thank you young man, you've been so kind. But I never got your name. This is now when you speak. This is when you talk. And he says to her, imagine you're holding someone's grocery and they're actually talking about you and they don't know who you are. But they're putting you down. And now you complete the journey with them and you're still helping them. What is the Prophet telling us? The Prophet is telling us that this lady needs help. She needs help and she doesn't know it. But if the Prophet were to get angry, what would happen? She wouldn't get the help that she needed. So he says, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. She says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. How do you take someone's heart like that and just flip it 180 degrees? How do you take it 180 degrees? How? In like what? A few minutes. Now, what I want to do is I want to go into the Prophet's thinking. What the Prophet, when he does this, what is he thinking inside his head? Let's see and let's learn from this. How do we derive this? We said yesterday that you have two chances, you have two choices. You either get anger, or you take responsibility. I'm going through this whole thing because it's so important. You need to hear it again. Because if you take this and you put it into your system, I swear to you, you've got something so amazing. Because the rest of your actions are going to change. Because you're going to know how to deal with things. So now, on this level, we want to see who's in control. If somebody's putting you down, you think that they're going to be in control. But you want to know how you stay in control? By the way you respond. When you respond properly, you're in control. When you respond not in a proper manner, they're in control. Meaning, let's take a look now at the story. As they're walking, she says something to put him down. Who's in control? She is. Now, if the Prophet responds harshly, who's in control? She stays in control. If the Prophet responds by not saying anything, staying silent, who's in control? The Prophet. And she keeps doing this. And imagine somebody keeps putting you down. Let's go to another scenario. A man from Yemen was riding, and he comes up on who? Imam Hassan alayhi salam. He says to him, he says, who are you? He says, I'm Imam Hassan ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. He says to him, curse you and your father. Imagine somebody now comes up to you and starts putting you, not just you, your father down. And your father is known as Amir al-Mu'mineen, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And he starts putting you down this way. How would you react? A lot of us couldn't take that. We can't take it. We can't absorb it. Because what? Our pride gets in the way. We become prideful. We want to defend who? Our father. There's nothing wrong with that. But he's showing you if you can what? Hold back. Because Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, al-ihtimal qabru al-uyub. Meaning to have forbearance, to pull back. Pull back. It's the grave of sins of others. Because you're showing tolerance. When you show this tolerance, what happens? Look at how the Imam responds. He says, you're a stranger in this land. Has anyone given you housing? Meaning, has anyone taken you in? He says, you look so tired. He goes, come to my house. He said, I will feed you. How many of us would respond this way? Who's in control? Who? Imam Hassan alayhi salam. What you're doing, when you respond this way, there's no anger going into your heart. Your heart has to stay merciful. Because you realize you don't have the problem. Who has the problem? The other person. And that kind of control is amazing. When you can hold yourself to that level, it's amazing control. These are the scenarios that you'll see countless. There are countless times with the A'immah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When you can get this message into your system, It's amazing what happens. So now I want to go to a deeper level. What should be if we have, by the way, I just want to jump off course just for a second. I want to show you about what's going on with modern psychology for one reason, so you understand the weight of your tongue. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Modern studies have shown, and this is so important for someone who's about to be a father, or even you as children. You have to understand one thing. Now the mind, the brain, let's say now you break your arm, or you get hurt. If you break your arm and you get hurt, what happens? You feel what? Pain. You feel pain. Every one of us has felt pain. There are certain neurons, certain cells that fire in your brain, meaning it gives an activity part in your brain. There's certain neurons within your brain that fire. And they can see that on certain scans of the brain. So when you feel pain, something happens in your brain where they can scan it and they know which parts of the brain are active. Now, they tested this also when you get rejected, or someone says something negative to you, or someone puts you down. You know what parts of the brain fire? The same parts as pain. The same parts where we feel pain fire when you put someone down. So the next time you're going to talk to someone, make sure it's in the best manner. Make sure that you're respecting this person. Make sure that you're valuing this person, because you may what? Not just scolding them by your words, but you're actually making them hurt on the inside. It's amazing with this stuff what happens. That when the Prophet ﷺ has a smile on his face, he shakes someone's hand. What is he doing? He's massaging the other person's heart. And he's bringing them up to what? That you know what? You're important. You're valuable. This is the power of what? Non-verbal communication. When before you enter someone's presence, you're actually lifting them up. That's not an easy thing to do. It's an art form within itself. So now the Prophet, what should be our goal if we understand this? And we are taking in from the Prophet and how we should conduct ourselves. What should be our goal when we enter a conversation? You have to ask yourself that question. Let's say you're in your room and your dad comes into the room, or your mom comes into the room. They've entered your presence, meaning where you are now, you're in what? You need to communicate. How do you communicate? What should be your goal in this conversation? Now, here's one thought, and take it with you. Ask yourself this question. Whenever you have any conversation with anyone, ask yourself this question. Does the person leave in the same state they enter my presence? Do they leave in a better or worse state? Ask yourself that question. Now let's weigh this question on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the lady entered his presence, where was she? She was full of anger. She had hatred in her heart. When she left his presence, she was a Muslim. Could you imagine you had that ability? When someone enters your presence, it's your opportunity. Meaning that you have a chance to actually do something good. Especially when someone is not feeling that well. And you actually bring them up to the next level. That's not an easy thing to do. So now if this is your goal, what should you do? Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, Ya ayyuha as-sa'il, istami' thumma istafham, thumma istayqin, thumma ista'mil. Number one thing he says what? Istami', listen. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was asked, he said, what is knowledge? He said, number one, silence. Look, this is so amazing. If we want to truly learn, take this. He says silence. He says, what's number 2? He says listening. He says, what's number 3? He says, practicing what you have listened to. He said, what's number 4? He says, actually number 4 was practicing what you have listened to. Number 3 was remembering what you have listened. Number 4 is practicing what you have listened to. And number 5 is now you can relate it to someone else. How many of us start in number 5? We don't want to listen to go through the other steps. We don't want to take the time, because that other time, those other steps are very hard. It's very hard for us to step back and actually listen to someone. It's not an easy thing to do. But Imam Ali alayhi salam is telling you what? The first thing you need to do is listen. Now, in the Quran it says, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. So you have what? You have the power of this. Then it says, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ عَلَّمَهُ الْبَيَانَ. He has taught you what? Utterance. You have these 2 facilities. Number 1, you can hear. Number 2, you can speak. Now, Imam Ali alayhi salam is telling you how to use this properly. Listen how. He says, I have stepped into the shoe of the man that is older than I, reflected in his mind so I can understand the vicissitudes of time, meaning the fluctuations of time. Meaning, what is he doing here? What do you do when you're actually listening to someone? And we're going to go now into how do you listen to someone. Imam Ali is telling you that when you actually listen to someone, you have to jump out of your own perspective, meaning the way you're looking at things. Look into their perspective at the same situation and try to figure out how they're looking at it. Now I tell you, this is the most challenging thing you can go through. It's not an easy thing because we love our own perceptions. We love to see things in our own views. So if you can do that, jump out of your own perspective, meaning the way you see things, look into someone else's perspective, and now what? Understand how they're thinking. The Prophet was a master at this. The Prophet was known not to ever interrupt anyone. Because you know what he's looking for? He's listening, and he's seeing where they went wrong in their thought process. So when he applies the medicine to the situation, it's right on tact. You have to listen for the problem first, then you give the antidote. But most of us, we don't want to do that because we don't have the proper listening skills. Now, how do you listen to someone? The Prophet said, we mentioned this yesterday, he says, Al-ilmu khaza'in. Al-ilm khaza'in. That knowledge is like a treasure chest. Then he says, وَمُفْتَاحُهَا السُّؤَالِ. And its key is what? Is a question. You guys fooled me for a second. It's a question. Then he says, who benefits from this interaction? He says, the one who's questioning, the one who asks the question. He says, number 2, the other person that benefits is the one who's going to answer. Then he says, number 3 is the one who's listening to the conversation. Then he says, number 4 is something so beautiful. He says, it's the one who loves to see this transaction. A lot of us, let's say you're hearing a religious conversation, and you may have, inshallah, nobody here, but you may have friends that whenever you talk about religion, what happens to them? They don't want to hear it. They want to walk away. You know why? You know why they want to go through this? In the Quran it says, فِي أُذُنِهِ وَقْرًا. He doesn't want to what? Hear it. فَبَشِّرْهُ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. If we have this, now imagine into you're listening to a religious conversation, or someone you know, and they get what? Aggravated. That means there's something wrong with the heart. There's something wrong with their system that's driving them. On that note, I want to jump back now to what? what Imam Ali alayhi salam is telling us. I want to put this in perspective so everyone knows, and we'll end with this. If someone walks into an alley and he gets jumped by 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 guys, let's say big guys, they jump him. Whose fault is it? His fault? Who says it's their fault? Okay, so we have 2 different sides, correct? Now pay attention to this. This will solve a lot of your problems if you know how people think. Now, if you say it's him, it's his problem, you know what you're looking through? You're looking through a lens of what? Awareness. He should have been more aware. Don't walk down in the alley, it's at night, don't do that. Well, you weren't thinking, you should be more aware. That's the lens you're looking through. Now, if you blame the other people, and you're saying, you know what, no one should do this to someone else. What are you saying? You're looking through the lens of justice. Are they both correct? Absolutely. You can have 2 perspectives. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the same reality, but it's how you're looking at the reality itself. Now, you know what happens with most people? They take one position and they never look at someone else's position. Now, you know when I have a conversation with someone, this is the first thing I do. I narrow their whole conversation. Let's say they're making statements. I narrow it down to 1 word. And I see what perspective they're looking at. I see exactly how they're looking at things. And you know what happens? When you see that, and when you can actually master this, it's amazing what happens. Because now, you know what we love as people? We want to be understood. When you know the other person has understood you, it's the most powerful thing. How many times in your conversations you're like, no, that's not what I meant. Why? Because the person you feel has not understood you. That's why you say that. Now, imagine you can actually go through the other guy's perspective and look at it through his view. And then you tell him, this is how you're looking at it. And he's like, yeah, you're absolutely correct. You've got the conversation under control. Believe me. If you can do that, understand that perspective of the other side, it's amazing what you can do. So, you need to develop these tools. You need to develop the powerful tool of listening. And I'll end with this. How should we listen to someone? This is what the Prophet used to do. Not me. Not me. Don't take it from me. Take it from your Prophet. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The Prophet was known to always be square to the person. Meaning, he would never talk to you with his shoulder. He was known to never look at a person with the corner of his eye. Meaning, he would never look at that. Why? Because it shows deceit. You may be what? Having some kind of trick up your sleeve. He would always position himself in a way, he would always have his companions where they'd be in a circle. Why? So no one would be above the other person. This is amazing. When you learn and implement these things into your system, the power that you will possess is control. And you can control conversations to a whole nother level. Well, people at the end of the day will be like that woman. You can turn their perspective in 1, 2, 3. So simple. By what? Having that heart of mercy. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين صلوات على محمد وآل محمد